Welcome to the TomorrowZone Catalyst Podcast, where we explore the art of the possible and what's next in business, leadership, and innovation. I'm your host, Deb Reuben. Today, we're diving into the power of perseverance while navigating the messy middle, the uncertain and sometimes chaotic space where transformations happen. I'm joined today by my guest, Britta Newly, an entrepreneur, marketing strategist, and podcast agency founder. Her story is just a masterclass in reinvention. She went from artist and welder to corporate leader to business owner. And I'm excited to hear her story. Britta, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Deborah. It is such a pleasure to be here.
So I'm excited to dive in. And I was wondering if you could kind of introduce yourself in your words. So in a nutshell, how would you define what it is that you're doing today in the world of business?
I believe that I am a storyteller that allows people to connect authentically with their ideal customers or ideal targets in a way that is scalable and authentic. And so for me, what that means is getting at the heart of someone's story and being able to tell that in multiple different ways through the art of podcasting and through the art of getting to know their internal team, getting to know their brand, and then also getting to know how their brand appears in the world.
Well, I think that, one of the things that attracted me to your story is just that radical transformation. And I wonder if you could just share a little bit about your backstory and just some of the highlights along the way that led you to doing what you're doing now with authentic storytelling at scale. How did you go from artist to an agency owner?
So, like you said, I started as an artist and I did that for about 10 years. For me, as an artist, it really was about how to tell a story with the materials. So I was a sculptor primarily, and I loved telling a story through what you call the provenance, or basically the origin story of the materials. And, kind of stacking some of the provenance or origin stories of these materials on top of each other and these meanings on top of each other. And sometimes physically stacking, sometimes not, but stacking these meanings on top of each other and then using that to tell a broader story visually. So, for example, I had a sculpture that had a huge chunk. It was a rock that was part of like a crumbling church tower that was being repaired in Minneapolis. And then I do this often. I dumpster dove for some of the rock scraps. And I was like, oh, these are so cool because they just spoke to me. I don't know. The materials just speak to me. So it spoke to me and I grabbed it. And then I had this deer rib bone, and the rib bone just, I don't know why, it just spoke to me and it was really interesting. And then it started to, so the provenance of the rib bone and the provenance of the crumbling church rock. And it started to tell a story to me of my own faith journey, of how my perceptions of Christianity sort of crumbled as I was learning how to really come into my full feminine power and, manifest my gifts and talents in the world, and how as that crumbled, it sort of built a bridge to this new person that I was to become, that I could mold and shape. So the sculpture is this rock that I cast in a set of wax. So it's a brown wax, and then this rib bone sort of connects them. And the idea being that, like, biblically or in the Torah, it's, has the woman coming from the man's rib bone. And so there's all of these symbols and ideas about each object that I stack on top of each other to kind of tell a story. So that was me in my artist days. And I feel like I'm going way too in depth here. I'm sorry. I'm just like,
that's fascinating, though. I never heard anyone describe finding so many layers of meaning in objects that other people would just dismiss. You're connecting the dots in some very interesting ways there.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So this is what I like to do with brands and, with larger stories, like find these pieces, these really authentic little pieces of how brands started and, stories that the employees have and and stories that their customers have. And, these little, where's this through line and how can I connect them all into this very interesting story that we can tell, the larger public. But so for me, starting as an artist, it was really the storytelling that got me and the visual storytelling. And then I transitioned into business because I realized that business really business can be very artistic, that except for instead of using materials like clay or wood or paint, you're using materials, and using is maybe a bad term, but you're building with people and relationships. And so those are the materials, and that's a more complex material to me. And I get excited when complexity enters the room. I know for a lot of people it stresses them out, but my problem solver brain just gets like so excited. So entered the corporate sphere, learned how to manage people and relationships. I was in management consulting. And then marketing was a very natural fit for me because of my artistic background, and things took off from there. So I was at a couple different agencies, and then I was at a venture capital studio doing some go-to-market strategy. And then we were having a lot of trouble accessing our ideal customer. And it was just a very insular industry. And so I'd seen someone do a lead generation play where they started a podcast and invited their ideal customer as a guest, as a sort of chink in the armor way to get their foot in the door.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked extraordinarily well for that agency. And so I decided to try it at this venture capital studio, and it went bonkers. I mean, it was so great. It worked so, so well. And it brought sort of an estimated $1.5 million worth of sales revenue, potential sales revenue, to the sales funnel in less than 90 days. And it built our reputation. And it was so amazing. And I remember my boss, we had a bit of a sticky relationship, but I remember him looking at me one day and being like, I think that you found your thing. I think this is your thing. You're really good at this. And I was like, oh, maybe I did find my thing. And so then, lead into a couple years later, and I ended up getting let go from an agency job that I was at. And people just kept asking me about podcasting. And I started to give all this advice away for free. And one of my friends kind of just shook me and was like, quit giving this advice away for free. I think this might be a business for you. And then it just kind of took off from there. So.
Wow. I love the way that you're connecting the dots in new and interesting ways. I mean, that's part of what we do when we're innovating, and you're taking ingredients from all different places to come up with something new that brings value to the world. So definitely see that in your story. In our previous conversation, you had talked about how we can sometimes romanticize transformations, and you went through quite a transformation to get to this new place and this new business. But often we can forget just how hard the messy middle is in that transformation. And we do a lot of work at TomorrowZone with teams who are undergoing major business transformations, whether it's upgrading their business systems and processes or radically changing their culture to foster innovative change. That, the in-between space before the magic happens, the magic is actually happening along the way, but it looks really messy.
Right.
So what's your take on navigating that kind of uncertainty? Because you seem a little bit attracted to some of that complexity. How do you deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, complexity kind of excites me. And I think it was sort of an accidental thing. Life has just been complex for me, and in lots of different ways. And so I've had to learn how to navigate it. I grew up with dyslexia and ADHD, and I didn't know. This was all undiagnosed. I just thought I was, for lack of a better word, I just thought I was stupid. And so I just had to figure out how to work differently than other people, to mask enough, to appear smart enough, and to be able to get enough of the material in school to be able to pass classes. And, I would say I was like a B student, and I worked really, really hard. But my sort of the complexity there. And the way I had provided a workaround was, instead of, reading the books really studiously, I would just ask a lot of questions of the teachers, and I'd make really, really good friends with the teachers. And so that kind of set me up for this way of being in the world where I just do relationships. That's how I learn, and do relationships through storytelling. And I remember my 8th grade year, because I had dyslexia. I don't know why. I'm a very good writer, even though I have dyslexia, but I can't spell for crap, Deborah. It's really sad.
I use machines to help me get over that problem now.
When I was in 8th grade, I wrote a paper on Beethoven, and my choir professor thought I had plagiarized it because of some of the worksheets I had done. But the paper he thought was immaculate. And so I got in trouble. And then I was like, I did not plagiarize this. And then, he called my mom, and she's like, no, she didn't. I promise you. And she showed him some of my other, writing. And he was like, oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, we romanticize it, I think, because we see the end point, and we talk about like Steve Jobs and, oh, he started in a garage and that's so cool and blah, blah, blah. We forget about, the years when he sat in the garage and staring at the garage door thinking like, what have I done? Like, maybe this is never going to work. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I'm just trying my best. We forget about, all the late night walks he took, and all the times he was ashamed that he was still living in his parents' house. And there was a period of time I know that he was homeless when he was like hopping friends' couches and and he failed out of college, and he was taking a calligraphy class, which is how he decided to have different fonts inside of the word processor and in Mac products. And yeah, we forget about all of that and how difficult that is, and what a squeeze that is on our souls and our hearts and our minds, and how hard it is to maintain a sense of value and worth while life is working itself out. And I've had that struggle as I've grown this agency. Contracts, good contracts and bad contracts. Every contract's a good contract, but contracts that I wrote well and contracts that I didn't, taking that responsibility and learning and struggling, and, money's not coming in, or it is coming in, or there's a lot of, feast, famine, all of that stuff, making those mistakes. And I guess I think it's with the danger we have in romanticizing the messy middle is that entrepreneurs, myself included, when they're in that messy middle, think they have this sense of terminal uniqueness where they're just like, oh, I must be the only terrible entrepreneur that couldn't figure this out right away and is having such a hard time and so many doubts.
Yeah, well, I think it, really shows the leadership lesson is that you're not alone in that journey, and the transformation is really a linear path. There's a lot of twists and turns along the way. I think that you've kind of reinvented, in a way, the ability to not only create content. A lot of people view podcasting as merely entertainment or content creation, but I think you're doing podcasting with a bit of an innovative twist. And you mentioned early on storytelling and showing authenticity, but doing that at scale. So can you share a bit about how you're uniquely using podcasting as a relationship building, lead building tool?
Yeah. So anyone, if a business chooses to create a podcast, and really any content they produce that gets out into the world that hits somebody's eyes, a potential customer's eyes, is the beginning of building a relationship. It's building an impression of what this brand is, ideas about, who the people might be behind this brand, how they might navigate questions or situations. Any type of content you produce starts to create an impression in the mind of whoever consumes it. And podcasts are so unique because it gives you, the human voice is it's such a comforting mechanism to build relationship with people. And storytelling in particular is how, we communed, cavemen around fires, how we communed together and learned about the world. And so if you can create trust by putting forward a human voice from your brand, and it essentially gives you an opportunity to build and create trust before you ever get in the room with your client in a way that's more compelling and more sticky than, written content, because someone's voice, the auditory, it engages more of the senses. And again, it's a comforting aspect. And so it creates that stickiness for a brand, that otherwise wouldn't happen. And you think about, like Tony the Tiger, for that brand, that brand of cereal or whatever, like that's a really particular voice and we can hear that in our heads, or like, and so voices can also be something that is branded. And if you choose to create something compelling around story and branding, and unite it with your brand, whether you're an industrial tech company or you're, a consumer CPG brand, creating that creates another sort of hook in the mind of your customer to create some stickiness and some grab so that your brand stays in their mind longer.
I love that. I never thought, Britta, of voice as an element of your brand.
Yeah.
Like, this is the first time I've ever connected the dots on that.
That's so funny because you have a podcast.
I know. Yeah. I mean, we're close to 50 episodes in. So thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
So at TomorrowZone, often we make time to explore future possibilities as we're developing strategies and actions for today. So, with podcasting and personal branding and thought leadership evolving so rapidly these days, how do you see storytelling shaping business and innovation over the next several years? Where do you see things going?
I think storytelling is going to become even more essential because, like, for instance, one of the companies I'm currently working with is in the AI sphere. And, as software and product offerings in the software space become more and more complex, the ability to be able to tell a story about why that particular product is significant is going to be so important, because the decision maker, the CEO that's going to be purchasing this product for their company is so disconnected from the engineer who knows exactly what this product does and can tell you, but can't create language and story to be able to tell this CEO why it's important. So bridging this gap with storytelling is really, really important, especially in the tech sphere. And, storytelling, like I said, is a great vehicle to do that. I think also too, with the rise in AI, there is a lot of people are recognizing that storytelling is important. So they're using AI to tell a lot of these stories. So for me, that's exciting because it means the humanity in these stories can be amplified. So anybody who has a different take or a different tweak, something that AI could never possibly come up with, like that is going to be an advantage for a brand, for a person, for a company, finding that unique voice that, AI could never tap into. So.
Oh, yeah. I love that. One of the things that I'm finding more and more is just how much storytelling can be a bridge. And oftentimes we are bridging innovation and adoption. And what we're finding over and over again is it's that story that's the bridge. Even kind of like in your sculpture, you had a bridge from past to future. It's kind of like what we're doing in our work. So I'm fascinated that you brought that up again, because, AI comes up for us every single day, but just within the past few months, storytelling has been coming up over and over and over again, whether it's adoption or understanding new technology, especially in the AI sphere. Where can listeners find out more about you and what you do?
Yeah, so you can go to cranepodcast.com. We are still developing our website right now because this business is still nascent and kind of grew up under my feet. But on there's a couple links to some podcasts that we've developed with some clients. And there'll be definitely more going up soon. So cranepodcast.com. You can also go to my LinkedIn page. My name is Britta Newly. And I'm always posting about the podcasts that we're promoting. And you can consume some of my content. And and on Spotify, there's tons of podcasts that you can search for. But I bet you if you search for Crane Podcasts or Britta Newly, you'd probably find several on there. So
awesome. Yeah. Thank you. So there's one final question I wanted to ask you, and we ask this of all of our guests. It's just part of exploring our curiosity. So what is one thing that leaders can do today to shape a more awesome future?
I think it's really important for leaders to embrace the I don't know and to force their teams to embrace the I don't know. Because when we come up with an answer too quickly, we narrow our possibilities. We narrow the infinite possibilities that could be out there to solve something. And if we can stay, it's so uncomfortable to stay in that place of uncertainty. And as a leader, sometimes they feel like they're failing when they don't have that immediate answer. And I know I have. But when you stay in that place of possibility and you seek an answer slowly, with the help of your team and are open and vulnerable, oftentimes the solutions that you can come up with are much more exciting, much more compelling, and much more useful than you would ever be able to imagine on the spot or, quickly.
Love that so much. Oh, you can't get better than that. Britta, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really fun to hear your story and your insights.
Great. Thank you so much, Deborah. This was such a blast.
And to our listeners, if you found value in this episode, share it with someone who needs to hear it. We invite you to subscribe and join us again. Until next time, stay curious and choose to make awesome happen.